Thank you, brother. Okay, so we are starting chapter 24. We have just covered Abraham burying Sarah at the end of chapter 23. And I think we now see him turn his attention towards Isaac and setting Isaac's life in motion. So we're just going to read through. 24 is a long chapter, so I'll do my best not to make sure it's not just me reading this whole time. But we'll get started here in verse 1. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. So we see, even after the passing of Sarah, that it's clear that God has taken care of his servant. He has provided him with direction, safety. He's given him wealth and fulfilled his promise to him of having a son. And again, I think we see a pivot, and I think this is the natural pivot that many of us make or are maybe making now. As we age, as we have children or grandchildren, our attention shifts to their needs and their future instead of our own. So Abraham is making this pivot here. And we go to verse 2. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac." So Abraham wants his servant to take an oath by placing his hand under his thigh. This is not something we would normally see today. We would see people take oaths by putting a hand on a Bible or putting their hand, one hand in the air, maybe with one hand on the Bible. Why did he ask his servant to put his hand under his thigh? Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was part of the culture as well, that type of thing. Like you and I shaking hands, something like that.
Right, yeah. So we don't know that there's an exact meaning behind this, but it certainly signifies something important or something solemn. The thigh is the biggest or the strongest muscle in the body. The thigh would have been concealed or in private from others. So there's some significance here to this request. We also see later in Genesis, Jacob asked Joseph to do this in taking the oath to bury him with his ancestors instead of burying him in Egypt. So this is not the only time we see this, but don't have an exact meaning behind it. Do yourself a favor, don't go down the internet rat hole of looking up this. They're filled with all sorts of crazy theories, and it's not worth your time. But why would he not want Isaac to marry from those around him? God, go ahead, Dee. Yeah, I mean, we've seen already in Genesis where marrying outside of those who share that kind of spiritual lineage of the same faith is problematic, right? So in chapter 6, it leads to God destroying the earth through the flood. That's the beginning of the problem that's the problem in the beginning of chapter 6, is that men were marrying for physical looks and not considering spiritual matters at all. So again, that's the problem that leads to the flood. And so Abraham has obviously learned from that. What else does Abraham learn of that aids in his decision here? Kenny?
At this point, he knows the character of the people that are there.
Sure.
He comes from the land of godless people.
Right.
He knows the land of godless people. The promise is through Abraham, not through the other people.
Right.
I think one of the things that happens here is he recognizes he's not among a people of great character.
Right.
And these people are not looking for God. And by the way, neither were they back home either. It is his family that is interested, not necessarily the people.
And he becomes aware of his family having descendants, right, at the end of chapter 22. He became aware of his brother having children and them having children. So he now is aware, at least we become aware in the story, that he knows that there are other descendants from his family that he can go back and choose to find a spouse for Isaac from. So, any other thoughts or comments here? Okay. Verses 5 through 9. The servant said to him, "Suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came?" Then Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there." The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this my oath, only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. The servant asks a good question here. What if she will not come with me? But Abraham is passionate about Isaac not going back to the land. Why do you think that is? Yes, sir?
Well, this was not the promised land, and he had been given the promised land. Therefore, don't look backward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This was the land of promise, or God had sent Abraham here. Why would he send his son back out of the land, especially having no instruction that we know of from God to do so, right? So there would be really no reason for him to do that. I think it also shows Abraham's belief in God's ability to deliver. He had delivered in every other circumstance. Surely the Lord would deliver here again. And so strong was his belief that he tells the servant that an angel of God would go before him, and that the servant would not have to complete the oath if she would not come back with him. Again, Abraham makes two warnings to the servant not to take Isaac back there out of the promised land. And I find it interesting here that, and maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but Abraham was confident that in this mission so much that he didn't even mention the servant finding multiple people and having to choose from. It was, there will be a one. There will be the woman. Not women to choose from or find amongst, there will be the one. And maybe I'm reading too much into that, but there's only mention of one. And then we learn we see that the servant was obedient in doing this. Yep.
It sounds like from verse 5 when he says, perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land, must I take your son back to the land from which you came? I think he's talking about Mesopotamia and between the rivers where Terah lived. He's talking here about Nahor or Paran, where Nahor lives. And he's saying, you go take a wife from these people, which would be Rebekah's and her brother who are related to him, not go back across the river to where I came from. And the reason that God took them from there in the first place, Joshua says, is because they were other gods.
Yeah, I mean, that's where those invading countries or invading kings or warlords were. I think from a couple chapters ago, that's where they originated as well. So that would not have been a land to go back to. Yep. Other comments, thoughts? Sorry if it feels like I'm rushing. I'm not trying to, but we're only 10 verses in. We got 57 more to go. Okay. Verse 10, so the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. This journey was not a short journey. Oh, sorry, I'm behind on the slides. From my eyeing of how far this is, this looks to be in the neighborhood of about 600 miles. It might be a little bit more, it might be a little bit less. So this was not a short journey at all to go back to this land. Verses 11 through 14. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also. May she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. What do you think about the servant so far? What has the servant kind of demonstrated thus far? Yes, sir. Faith in his master's God? Yeah, absolutely.
He's very specific about what he's asking for, but he gives God room to work within that specific
absolutely. Were you going to say something, Mike?
Well, he has faith, but he also has some doubts because of the way he said, what do I do if I don't find some girl? You know, whereas with total faith, he would have recognized that the Lord's going to provide.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting mission for him to be sent on, right? I think it may be done in a way to seek some clarity, to say, if I find myself in this position, what would I do? But yeah, you could certainly see that there might have been some question in his ability to or in the ability to do that. Jai? Yeah, very loyal, very committed. Right. Josh?
To Jai's point, there's an interesting line of thought that this could have been the same servant that Abraham mentioned back in 15. Were you getting that?
Yeah, I was. But no, you just go ahead and you just yeah, so the servant so far, I think, was diligent in getting some clarity from Abraham. He took the oath as requested. He was quick to get started on the journey. Again, I think when we see Abraham and his household now believe or be charged with something, he takes action quickly. Prayed for success and asked for quick results and clear signs. Josh, why don't you go ahead and make your point now? I know you're no, it's fine. Yeah. It could be that this servant is the same one mentioned before in chapter 15, verse 2, Eliezer of Damascus. And while we don't know that that's true, or we can't be sure that it is him, it is somewhat remarkable that he's gone from being Abraham's heir by default, right? Remember in chapter 15, verse 2, Abraham has no children, and so Abraham is talking to God and basically saying, am I to leave everything to Eliezer? So he's gone from being this default heir to securing a wife for Abraham's true heir. And I think that's, when you look at the swing of that over a period of time, that's really true service and commitment, right? At one point thinking, you may be the one to receive all these things from my wealthy master, my faithful master, to I continue to serve throughout his life. So again, we don't know that is the same, but certainly notable if it is. Questions, thoughts? Okay. So the servant has made his request to God. We'll continue on in verse 15. Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. I mean, what a response to this prayer, right? Even before he was done talking. Rebekah met his request exactly as he had asked, really leaving him in stunned silence. Right? Is this possible that this has happened? And what a contrast between Abraham having to wait for so long for a child and God answering this prayer even before its conclusion. Huge contrast there. Rebekah's offer to water the camels. What do you make of this? Now, if you've already read the material, you have a slight advantage here. But what do you make of this request, Gary?
A couple things. Obviously, the good material talks about the work that she had to do and how much labor that would have taken. But the interesting thing to me is going back to the specificness of his request. The fact that she gave him water would have been part of the custom. That was a custom to give a weary traveler some water. But the thing that was outside of that was the fact that she offered to have the animals get some to drink as well. That would have been very, very specific and would have been out of the ordinary.
And probably wise upon the servant's part to ask for that, right? If he just asked for just general hospitality, then how would he know, right? But he has asked for something in addition to that which he receives that would have been out of the ordinary.
That would have gone to your point earlier, a good point about there could have been multiple people that fit that description, but the specificness of I'll feed the camels as well was unique to her.
Absolutely. This task of the camels, what do we know about camels? They drink a lot of water, right? So This would have been no small task. If it had been several days since they had been watered, each of them, remember 10 camels, could have drank up to 25 gallons of water, requiring 8 to 10 trips to get water for each camel. So she potentially, if there had been a couple days of travel, make 80 to 100 trips just to water these camels. Even if they had been watered the day before, they could easily drink 5 gallons each, requiring 2 to 3 trips each. So there's no way for her to have known what the needs of these camels are. We're not told that they had a conversation. So it's an impressive offer and a really significant gesture to go through that much labor and effort to take care of this. Jai.
My question is, what is God's input or influence in her to see the specificity of doing such a service? What is God influence her? Is she of all natural being?
I'm missing your question, sorry.
What was God's input in making them see the things that she wants to see?
Oh,
Makes sense? No?
I'm still.
He's asking, like, what's God's input? Like, did he have a control over her and what she did? I think that.
Yes, that's exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think obviously, Abraham had said to the servant, right, that an angel will go before you, right, and kind of show you the path. And I think there was obviously influence there. But to the extent, we don't know exactly, but clearly this is kind of playing out as it's meant to be, right? And I think that's the influence of God there. Other thoughts, comments? I know we think we're very hospitable, but I don't think we've lugged. By the way, a gallon is 8 pounds, right? So you're talking about 25 times 8. What is that? 400 pounds of water or 200 pounds of water per camel? So this was not a small task. Just one of those small details that you don't necessarily think about, but certainly would have drawn attention to her character, and her service. I don't know if they carried it on their head. I think it mentioned that she had her jar over her shoulder when she was coming, but that doesn't mean that it was full. So I don't know how they would have carried the full jars. Yes?
They also say camels are a sign of wealth, that this would put this man, Abraham's servant, as somebody. The other thing, if you want to, Guy's question, if you read 1 Kings 22 when you have time, God puts words in people's mouths to accomplish
Right.
his purpose. He could very easily put words in people's mouths.
Yeah.
to accomplish it.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, verses 22 through 27. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels in gold and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in." Then the man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth towards my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers." So again, we see the servant have success in his efforts to get to Abraham's family. His prayers have been answered. He is immediately thankful for that. What do you notice about the servant's praise here? Again, maybe a small detail, but it's interesting a little bit to me.
His first thought is to the Lord, and his second is for his master, his employer.
Yeah. Starts with the Lord, then to his master, and then for himself. One of the commentaries that we were using to study had this quote, "Success, which inflates the natural man, humbles the man of God." All right, so I think this servant's faith being strong, he remembers God first, remembers his master next, and then himself. Jay, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, one of the main ways that her silence.
Yeah.
Because there's a way of getting 500 pounds of water. The attitude of doing it, the frustration behind it, and she's excited to do that. The servant kind of attitude. So he's watching her, how she's doing it, what's going on, and just being able to assess. This is the right one. Yeah, this is the right one.
Yeah.
The attitude is right as well.
Yeah, her efforts definitely demonstrated that she was the one he had come looking for, right? Okay, verse 28. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he had heard the words of Rebekah his sister saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. So of what we know, what does Rebekah have to tell her household? Again, of what we know. Not much, right? So a stranger has arrived who's asked for water. She offered to water his camels while he looked on in silence and disbelief. He's given her a ring and bracelets and asked to stay in her father's house. And upon hearing who her father was and that there was room, he bowed and worshiped the Lord. Right? So we know the story. We're hearing the story. I don't think Rebekah has heard all of this. We don't have a record that they've had a conversation where the servant has disclosed all of the background yet, right? Which I think will make this next part here in a minute even more interesting or more amazing. What are your first impressions of Laban here? Rebekah's brother? Steve?
When the man of God asked her about provision, she says, "We have adequate feed and straw and room for you to lodge." When Laban sees the wealth on her wrist, he says, "Oh, we've prepared a place for you." I think this is an insight into his
I think so too.
goodness.
Yep.
His dealing with Jacob is going to show
Yeah.
that he's concerned about his.
I think it's very easy for us to look at Laban and say, okay, well, Laban was hospitable, and at least of what we see, that he was open to sharing and to having him come into the house. But the writer here doesn't let us miss that Laban noticed what had been given to her, right? The ring and the bracelets. Again, if camels were a sign of wealth, these things don't escape Laban, and I think it gives us potential something to keep in mind throughout his dealings here and later on in Genesis. I thought I might have seen a hand somewhere. Okay, so he goes in the house, verse 33, but when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I have told my business." And he said, "Speak on." Again, the servant here, I think, does not indulge himself in eating first. He stays focused on the task at hand. He's completely devoted to his master's will here. And again, as the point I made a minute ago, this is the first time any of them have, at least again what we know, they have heard the entire story. So just imagine, maybe we'll try this. If you're a woman, imagine you're Rebekah hearing this story for the first time. And if you're a man, imagine you're Bethuel, like Rebekah's father. All right, so I'm going to read through this account really quickly. Again, it's almost verbatim what we've just read, but again, imagine that you're hearing this for the first time. Verses 34. So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son.' I said to my master, 'Suppose the woman does not follow me.' He said to me, 'The Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you to make your journey successful, and you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath.' So I came today to the spring and said, 'O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I go successful, behold, I am standing by the spring. And may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, Please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she will say to me, You drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son.' Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder, and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. And I bowed low and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. So now, if you're going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, let me know that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. Okay, so in the 2 or 3 minutes I read that, probably a little bit slower in how the servant spun the tale. You've just heard the whole version of how he got to be there. And now he's asking for Rebekah to go and marry his master's son. So if you're Rebekah, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
I love your point about putting yourself in her mind, what she's thinking. She's obviously hearing this and knows it's about her. Verse 39 sticks out to me. When I asked my master, what if the woman will not come back to me, with me? So she knows at some point she's going to be asked to do something, and it's going to be a journey somewhere. And he's laying the story out very, very specifically, and she knows specifically about her.
Right? All attention's on her here. Yeah. What else? JD?
I looked at the point of the ring. I was thinking ring on the finger, the ring in the nose. The servant put the ring in her nose. It was kind of interesting to me. Come here, let me put this ring.
Maybe he gave it to her and she put it in versus he. Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You know, you mentioned earlier, that Abraham had become aware of his brother's family. Of course, we don't know that news hadn't traveled back as well. So while he is giving the full story of here's why I'm here, here's what God has done with Abraham, it could be that Rebekah knew of, Abraham and his family as well. But
Yeah, and I think maybe even at the point of the initial being at the well, I think when the servant is praying and, my master's brothers, you have brought me to the house of my master's brothers, the fact that that's the point where she kind of turned and went, hey, this is word from family, right? Or this is from family. Kenny?
The other thing is, apparently Laban had enough room for 10 camels and enough provisions for every. He's not doing too bad either. So the fact of the matter is, she's going to be going from one family that's apparently pretty well off to another family that is pretty well off. I think one of the things that, if I were in Rebecca's position, I think what you have to kind of correct her with is she's somebody who's ready for adventure. She's ready to go on an adventure, quite frankly, with God. Because she recognizes that she is leaving someplace that is very comfortable, by the way, which is exactly what Abraham did. To go to some place where she does not know what's going to go on. He's going to send her with a nurse as well. He's going to send her. She is basically going on an adventure with absolutely no idea what the outcome is.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have to laugh in my head because I don't think this is anything like how any of us got married or the story, it's just so far removed from what we would experience, right? Hey, there's this guy you've never met, but his dad told me to come and fetch you, and you're the exact person through all the things that I went through to find, and so are you going to come with me or are you not? Yeah, Kenny?
The other thing is, from what we know, Isaac is 40 years old. There's the potential that this girl is 14, 15, somewhere along those. But again, which is something that we do not relate to very well.
No, yeah. And of course, again, thinking about the oddity of this, right? So if you're Bethuel, her father, or I think in today's day and age, we would not be so eager to ship our daughter off in these circumstances, but we see very quickly that they do. Verses 50 and 51, then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. To me, this is almost kind of like why are you even asking us, right? This is the word of God. It's not up to us type of response from them. And when Abraham's servant heard these words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. The servant brought out articles of silver, articles of gold, and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. So in somewhat short order, this is now the third time that the servant has prayed to the Lord. The articles of silver, gold, and garments would have likely been the formal bride price for Rebekah. That was custom at the time. And we see again that only when the matter was settled would the servant kind of indulge himself, take care of his needs or the needs of those with him, and take rest from the journey. Questions? Other questions, comments so far? We're getting there. This is good. Verses 54, starting at the end of verse 54. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." But her brother and her mother said, "Let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10. Afterwards she may go." He said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." And they said, "We will call the girl and consult her wishes." Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." Again, I think we see the servant diligent to complete the task. Here's a potential hurdle that's put in the way, and he is undeterred from being taken off course here. What do you make of the counter here, or the response by Laban and Rebekah's mother to get her to stay longer? Go ahead if you look like you're about to.
I think it's reasonable. I mean, some stranger comes to town, I need to take your daughter from you. Do you want any time at all to say goodbye to your daughter?
Right.
I think it's very reasonable to say we would like for her to stick around for 10 days so we can get her ready to go somewhere.
Yeah. Or to say our goodbyes, right?
That's exactly right. And here's again, what strikes me so much. Everybody in this, and I think this is Abraham's insight. Everybody in this story has faith in God. Everybody. As opposed to where he's living now, which is nobody has faith in God. Abraham made the right decision because he went to a place that feared God.
Sure. Absolutely. I think it could very well be that this was part of the formalities of the day, that the bride had to consent. I think it is natural to want to spend more time with you don't know that she's ever going to see them again, right? To do that. I think it also could potentially be foreshadowing a little bit of Laban and how he deals with things. Whether that's a manipulation or renegotiation or a stall tactic, we will see that become more prominent later on in the book. But an interesting request here nonetheless. But could make a lot of sense based on what we know. And she says, "I'll go." And so verse 59, thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them." Then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Does this blessing sound familiar at all? Yeah, just turn back to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22, verses 16 and 17. And just for context, Abraham has just offered up the ram as a burnt offering. And the Lord tells Abraham, "Because you have done this thing and not withheld your son, your only son, indeed I will greatly bless you. I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies." So I would imagine that they would not have known about this blessing from God given to Abraham. So I think it's notable that they offer a similar one to Rebekah as she leaves. And as we talked about earlier, they begin the 600-mile or longer journey back to where Abraham and Isaac lived. And we'll finish the chapter starting in verse 62. Now Isaac had come from going to Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field towards evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay, so we've got through 67 verses, a long story, but really, what an interesting story. I mean, to me, it's almost movie-like, if you will, right? I mean, there's adventure, there's faith, there's service, there's love or romance. I mean, what a ride for those mentioned here, right? I mean, what do the kids say? Oh, it's like a movie, anyways. But I really think it's quite amazing, and so I just want to take the remaining time we have to look at these characters in the story here. We'll just start with Rebecca. What do you think about Rebecca here? What are you left with as a result of this chapter and our introduction to her? John?
I want to go back to something that might be very trivial.
We'll see.
She took her nursery. Is it a customary thing? She has many sisters. Do they all have nurses? My thought is she took us as a nurse. She's going to get children, and she's a nurse. It's interesting that she took her nursery.
Yeah, I think, I can't remember exactly, but this nurse had been with her since birth, so that may have been a small bit of comfort or familiarity to go with. And again, is it possible that they were also wealthy? That maybe so that that was not something that was, yes, there were more nurses.
To Jack's point, the text actually is going to comment on when this nurse dies, and it's going to be a couple of generations from now. So it's going to not be until after Jacob has kids. So the whole idea of bringing a nurse would be future children, or going along with the blessing that they pronounced on Rebecca, that she would be a mother to thousands and tens of thousands.
Gotcha. So it's equipping or preparing for that, right? Great, thank you. What else do you think about Rebecca?
She had great faith at the end of verse 58 when he asked her, will you go with this man? She didn't hesitate.
I'll go. Yeah, absolutely.
She's going to show herself to be somewhat more sensible in her faith later on than her husband.
Yeah, that's okay.
She's very caring, or she would have offered.
Yeah, service-oriented, hospitable, caring. Yes, absolutely. And to Gary's point, she was not hesitant about accepting this journey, right? Or accepting it. Kenny?
This is all arranged by God, it has to be arranged by God. This is the promised son, this is the promised wife, and this is a promised marriage for a promised future. And I think one of the things that strikes me about this is so unrealistic. This is so out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And God, it is so obvious to me that God had a hand in every part of this, because without God, none of this is possible.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we would look at these, if we were entered into these same circumstances, I think we'd be a lot more skeptical in general. All right. And I think it speaks to the fact that there was a significant amount of faith on all people involved here to trust the story, to believe that this is how it was delivered and the way that it played out. Sir?
But they still made their own choices. God did not make them make their choices. He allowed circumstances where they could make those choices.
Right. Fair enough. Yes, sir.
God knows the hearts of men and women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you take away from the servant? Kind of an unnamed central character here to this story. What do you take away from the servant? JD?
Well, he was the guy in charge of everything Abraham had.
Significant responsibility, right?
He was a significant decision maker, getting something done. He had a task, and it was a long journey, right? He goes 600 miles, find this person, come back. So it was a big task, and he was equipped to do it.
Yep.
And Abraham trusted him to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Abraham trusted to do it. He was well equipped for the task at hand. It was no small task. Right?
He made this good point earlier. He prayed for guidance. I mean, I've got a long list of stuff that he did. Made a plan, submitted his plan, prayed for guidance, devised a great strategy, all kinds of things. But the good point that you made, I think key to this is he prayed for guidance throughout this whole process.
And I think there's it would be easy for us to say he believed in the God of Abraham, right? And so, but I don't know that we see him really piggybacking on Abraham. I think he believed in God as well. And I think even me, you brought me to this place, right? And so I think it shows his devoutness as well. Steve, were you going to say something?
Well, I think it
Yeah, and I think the servant's dedication and undeterred nature is exactly what we see in a lot of Jesus' interactions during Jesus' time. And then the other one I'll ask, although not necessarily the involved throughout the whole story, but reflections on Abraham here. Any thoughts on what we see or what we take from Abraham?
I think at the start you made very clear that he's looking for godly offspring. The Old Testament closes in Malachi 2:15 and says, God desires godly offspring. And that's what this whole seed thing is about. Godly offspring.
Yep. Other thoughts on Abraham? Josh?
His comment to the servant that, the Lord can send his angel before God. We don't have any specified statement from God that he was going to do this, but that's, again, Abraham's faith. It is God's will that Isaac would have offspring, and so Abraham is completely believing that God is going to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And I think one of the other things, there's so much in the Bible that we don't know the story. This is one of the ones that I would love to know. What is the relationship between, if this is Eliezer or if it's not, what is the relationship between Abraham and this servant? Because apparently this is a man of such character that Abraham trusts him to carry out the biggest deal that he's got going on.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that he trusts that much. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we know about the problem that they have with Hagar. We don't ever read about a problem that they have with Eliezer. We don't ever read about a problem with the other servants. And the other thing that I really wonder about is, how many other servants did he have at his disposal? And this is the guy he chose. By the way, if it is Eliezer, he knew about Isaac years before Isaac was born.
Right.
This guy is not a spring chicken that's taking this important.
Right.
No, this guy is willing to take his family, put it on hold, and go do something that his master has asked him to do.
Yep.
And I think at this point in his relationship with Abraham, I think he could have told Abraham, you know what, I think I'm going to pass on that. Would you take somebody? No. I think that speaks to the character of him.
Yeah.
And really, I guess to the character of everybody in this story, including at this point Laban. Because I think that the character of Laban, and really to a large extent Rebecca, both of their characters are going to be changed when we see what happens with Jacob.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a last thing I'll mention. I do think this reflects positively on Abraham's faith. He was confident the Lord would provide a suitable bride. I also think it reflects on his example in teaching his household, right? And the servant clearly saw those things, adopted those things, and made them his own. So, all right. Thank you for your participation.